All right, let's call this meeting to order. This is the October 16th meeting of not yet the Concord Planning Board, but we're going to meet tonight in a work session. Just as a reminder, this is a work session for the Planning Board, for invited guests, Mr. Walsh from the city, and from the Architectural Design Review Committee. We're not going to take any public testimony. We'll come up with some action items. We'll come up with some follow-up that will be presented back and sent to the board. Going to go back to City Council for review. So welcome again, everyone. I think everyone is here. Oh, Jay wasn't here. Claude wasn't here last time, right? So
I'm Ron.
Sorry.
That's all right.
If you guys could just introduce yourself to the group so everybody knows who you are.
Yeah, Ron King. Anything else we should say?
Nope, that's good. Just
Good. Ron King.
all right.
And I'm Jay Doherty. I think I know a couple of you, but I don't know all of you, so nice to meet you.
Okay,
And you're a co-chair.
I'm also a co-chair, yes.
you guys could just roll through. Brent, if you could start us off.
Sure, yeah. I'm Brent Todd, Council Representative of the Planning Board. Jeff Santa Cruz.
Amanda Savage.
Teresa Rosenberger.
And Rich Woodfin and our lovely staff.
You know us.
So if we could, we're going to start with you, Matt. Is that okay? Nope, start with Teresa. Start with
the
Anne
architectural
Marie.
design review first.
Yes, that's right.
That way we for sure have enough time for it, for this very important discussion. So this was at the request of Architectural Design Review Committee, but it was something that I kind of intended to do anyway as a good refresher for the Planning Board and the Architectural Design Review Committee, and just kind of an overview of the process and what you can and can't do, what's required as far as timing, and I'll get into that. So first thing, I'll just read from the zoning ordinance, the section 28-1, and this gives everyone the purpose of the Design Review Committee. It was established by the Planning Board for the purpose of providing advice to the Planning Board relative to the conformance of development applications with compatibility standards of the zoning ordinance and the architectural design guidelines. And then the ordinance also, the zoning ordinance, provides us criteria for the Planning Board to make the decision for architectural design review, which is more than the limited scope that the Architectural Design Review Committee provides advice on. For instance, in the Planning Board's decision, the Planning Board looked at a number of items. The criteria from the Architectural Design Guidelines, the goals and recommendations contained in the master plan, purposes of the zoning ordinance, and the purposes of all the zoning districts, the recommendations of the Design Review Committee, reports of the city departments, reports, graphics, and other materials submitted by the applicant and the applicant's agent, and reports submitted from anyone else who can demonstrate standing, I guess, for lack of a better word. So while the Design Review Committee is more limited in that they are looking mainly at compliance with the architectural design guidelines, the Planning Board's decision is based on more than just the architectural design guidelines and the design review's recommendation. So I just wanted to point that out, that it gives you pretty broad leeway to craft whatever kind of conditions you feel are going to meet the purposes of the zoning ordinance, the purpose of the zoning district, the purposes and goals of the master plan, as well as the architectural design guidelines, the recommendation from the Design Review Committee and recommendations from staff. So you have a lot you can work with. I guess my message is you shouldn't feel constrained because the ordinance gives you a lot to work with in coming up with conditions for approving architectural design review. And then I'm going to flip to the architectural design guidelines, and that's where the committee is so important because they are professionals in their field, and that is pretty much their sole purpose, to review these applications, the site plan applications, in conjunction with the architectural design guidelines and provide that expertise that staff doesn't have and that probably most of the planning board members don't possess, so that you can make an informed decision. And I would like to briefly review all of the items in the architectural design guidelines. And there's a lot. The world is your oyster. First is general appearance criteria. 5.1, site development. Item A under site development is site organization, and that includes a number of things. Existing natural and man-made features should be carefully considered for integration into the overall site design. Developers should plan land development which responds to the surface flow of water. So that ties in stormwater management. Ron, that's always a question that you're asking. That's right in site organization of the architectural design guidelines. It's important to cluster buildings within a development wherever feasible. Separation of vehicular and pedestrian pathways. Walkways with landscaped borders and parking lot buffers. Item B is setback from streets. Those are mainly contained in the zoning ordinance, so I'm not going to say much on that. Building alignment. Existing, when a new development is in close proximity to existing structures, the new building should reflect the existing alignment. Existing building alignments relative to the street may have resulted from natural topography, waterways, climate, or the preferred alignment of a particular architectural style. Building spacing, and that goes on to describe spacing between new and existing buildings. Building siding. It just goes on and on and on. Arrangement within a large-scale site or at an isolated location should respond to site development criteria. Site features and their corresponding building relationships have a major influence on the character of the new development. Visual continuity. New site development can blend with the existing neighborhood by utilizing similar fences, tree placements, similar plantings, and walkways to give a feeling of continuity to the overall zoning district. There's a whole section on landscape and site treatment. I'm not going to review much of that, but there are items in there for existing conditions and incorporating existing vegetation into the landscape plan. There are items in there for pedestrian circulation. There are items in there for plantings, plant material size, screening requirements, landscape accent material, landscaping in parking, landscaping in site structures, accessory buildings, storage enclosures should be in character with the building architecture and surrounding landscaping. And then there's views. Scenic views from a site or public vistas through a project should be protected and enhanced where possible within the overall site development. And then there's section 5.3, which is building design and materials. And that gives us scale and proportion. And the size and proportion of windows and wall openings should be consistent with existing development that's in close proximity. There's an article, yeah.
So if you haven't haven't poked through these.
I know, they're old.
They are extremely old and probably need to be updated, but the scale and proportion, when you roll through that little cartoon photo that's there with the little man that's drawn down next to it, and then he's holding his arms open like this, it's worth rolling through and taking a look. How old are these?
1991 is when they were adopted. And I think as I was going through and refreshing my memory on them, they may be old, but the basic, even if we update it, these basics are not going to change, you guys. So vertical, horizontal emphasis, roof form, those are all things that are going to stay. We're not going to strike them. Architectural features and details, so any features such as balconies, decks, porches, columns, towers, skylights, arches, should all be in proportion with the building. And that's all something that can be considered as part of the architectural design review process. Materials and color. Yes, that is one of the guidelines. So materials and color can be a recommendation from the Architectural Design Review Committee, and the Planning Board can make a decision on it. The exteriors of buildings should utilize materials appropriate for the character of the building, compatible with significant adjacent structures. Goes on to say that all exterior surfaces visible to the public should be dealt with. So basically, if anyone who can see it from a street view, that elevation needs to be considered in the architectural design review process. Gives guidelines for color. Subtle colors should be used on larger and very plain buildings, while smaller buildings with elaborate detail can use more colors. Colors that are disharmonious with other colors used on the building or found on adjacent structures should be avoided. Paint colors should relate to natural material colors found on the building, such as brick, terracotta, stone or ceramic tile, and existing elements such as signs or awnings. Contrasting colors, which accent architectural details and entrances, are encouraged. There's a portion for screening of mechanical equipment, which is covered by the zoning ordinance and site plan regulations, so that's covered in 3 places. And then the last section is on signage, our favorite. And there is a section in there for scale and proportion of the sign in relation to the building and the overall site. Materials of the sign that should harmonize with the building's design. And it states a simple and direct message with upper and lowercase letters is most effective. A limited number of colors should be used with light colored letters placed on a matte dark background, which reduces reflected glare. Oops. A section on illumination, we're all familiar with that, in an opaque background. And then there's a section on coordination, that all the signage within a building complex needs to coordinate. I won't say anything else about that. And then last but not least is logos and graphics, and the company logos should be incorporated into the overall sign and not become the sign itself. So that there's a lot of information there, and I just encourage you to familiarize yourself with it, because again, as I said at the beginning, it gives everyone a lot of leeway to be able to make some good decisions for.
Which is great. But I think the first step is all new applicants coming in, we need to make sure they realize this is actually there. Because I think there's a lot of the applicants that ignore this and walk into you, and then you spend a lot of time trying to teach them what's in here. You know, it's almost, I wish there was a way we could do like a, did you receive it? Yes, here's my signature that I did receive it. Even if they didn't, but then they can't say, I didn't know. But you were given it, you signed that you had it. It's just, I mean, it's great that we know all this and they know all this, but I kind of chuckled, and you saw me chuckle when you said about all the signs in a building complex should be the same. Yeah, go to any one of the strip malls and tell me that is even close to followed. Or the sign, company logo should not be the whole sign.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just.
Well, and that takes us kind of, and that's a good segue, which takes us into more of the process. And Architectural Design Review Committee, has asked for, is there a way for projects to come back to them after it's already appeared to them once? And unfortunately, we're somewhat limited in that both the ordinance and the site plan regulations mandate that anything that requires architectural design review has to have the recommendation from the Architectural Design Review Committee before it's presented to the planning board. And we're further mandated by state with deadlines. So when an application is submitted, within 30 days, it has to be presented to the next available meeting of the planning board. So, for instance, if it's a minor site plan application and it's in a performance district, that requires architectural design review. It has to appear before the board within 30 days of being submitted, and it has to appear before the Architectural Design Review Committee for their recommendation before it goes to the board. So there is no time for it to go back to the Architectural Design Review Committee.
When does the 65-day clock click?
The 65-day clock clicks,
Once it's come to them?
clicks once the board has determined it complete. That starts the 65 days.
They can go
And
through the design review prior to that.
they can. And when it's a minor site plan, in a performance district, it has to. It goes to them before it's even presented to you to be determined complete. Because we have two different determination of completeness processes to confuse it even more. If it's minor, the determination of completeness and the public hearing take place in the same night. If it's major, the determination of completeness is a consent item, and that takes place at one meeting at which you determine it complete, and you set the date for the public hearing, and then the public hearing is the following meeting. So the major site plan applications are a little easier in that
You've got an extra 30 gap in there, so
Yeah.
to speak, between completeness and the
Yes.
first meeting,
Yeah.
which theoretically it
which
has.
they can, yeah. So by the time it gets to them, then it's a complete application, whereas the minor isn't necessarily complete, but the way all the deadlines are written, it has to go to them anyway.
Do we have set deadlines on when applicants must apply, or is it
Mhm.
rolling?
Yeah, if they have to apply for the next meeting, they have to apply by this meeting. So anyone who wants to be considered for the next planning board meeting, their applications had to be in today by 4.
How does that align with their schedule?
Well, they meet on the first Tuesday, so,
So there's a 2-week gap
mhm,
from us to them.
yeah.
Why is that? I'm just curious.
Well, why is there
Why
a
is there a
2-week gap?
two-week gap? I mean, I understand they've got to meet between when it's filed and when planning board meets, but could they meet sooner?
Like the Tuesday following when we meet
Tuesday.
on Wednesdays, so that there's now, does that give us an extra week? Because they're meeting before, technically before, because we meet the 3rd Wednesday. So
Yep.
they met last week, right? But did they meet
But we don't
2 weeks.
No,
look at it
they
until
meet
after
the
it's
first
determined.
Tuesday,
first Tuesday?
You
Sorry, I
meet
thought
the
you said the second.
third
what I had
Wednesday.
Right, I'm just wondering, can we align the times a little bit better that, like, I'm just trying to figure out, if we're the 3rd, do they meet the Tuesday after us?
Some of them are getting instructions from Architectural Design Review saying we're not going to approve this as it's submitted with this, and this. Maybe that gives them, the applicant, enough time to address all those deficiencies, to come to us and say, the Architectural Design Review didn't like the project because of these 3 things.
Right,
and
but
here
that's
we
what
are,
I'm
but
wondering.
couldn't-
if
they
they
couldn't do
submit
that.
on a Wednesday.
They
the
couldn't do that
following-
if they only
But
had a
logistically,
a
there's
couple
only
days.
3 business days, and a lot of times Mondays are holiday, not a lot, but there are quite a few Monday holidays. So I was just thinking that administratively, you only have 3 business days between an application being submitted, and should staff start to review it to even see if it's even like a complete application, it's a lot to process, I would think, for it to be ready for ADR in 3
Right,
business
but
days after.
What are they actually doing to send it to ADR, I guess is my question.
Well, to send it to the committee, basically, we just
Pass it through.
we just pass it
So
through.
there is
There's,
none.
I
there's
didn't know
not a
if you had
staff
any-
report.
So it's no different than us getting our packets on Friday. We have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday to review them because of the 2 holidays. No different, realistically, if it's coming in. And I'm not trying to I'm trying to see if we can have more time, because if there's an extra week in between their review and coming to the board, maybe there's an ability, I guess they don't meet again. That's the
To-
problem. It's not
right.
like they're meeting every 2 weeks, so you get more time to,
If
Go
they
back
met,
to
if
the
they
app.
met every week,
well, if we all met every week, that'd be different.
We'd have a committee.
Yeah, we have a committee.
No, but I guess I was just trying to figure out if there was a way to allow the applicant more time to revise it before they came back to us,
yeah,
is
there
where I was
would
looking.
have to be, they would have to meet twice.
Well, no, it just
before-
means they don't necessarily go back to them. If they have certain things they want to see changed, those changes could come to the board as changes, you know what I'm saying?
And that works, and I explain, and I think they understood it. So the board has to make a decision. So the only way that that works is if you deny the architectural design review. You can do whatever you want with the major or minor site plan. You can approve it with the condition that they have to get architectural design review approval. If you deny the architectural design review approval, stating that they have to go back to architectural design review committee, then that works. Then they can go back to the architectural design review committee. We've met the deadline to take it to planning board. Planning board's made the decision on the major minor site plan, but withheld the decision on the architectural design review.
Stuff you just mentioned that's in here crosses the line. Vehicular, site layout, site siting, business location, or building location, stormwater. So
It does.
I guess this is
Your
where.
clock's ticking
gets-
too.
So, yeah, I think
And-
the almighty clock is
The clock's
hard,
ticking.
and I think,
Yeah.
what the board, I think what the board needs to remember is, so if you make it clear to an applicant that you're dissatisfied with a part of their project, and you're dissatisfied to the point that you might be contemplating a denial, we're bound by a 65-day clock. The applicant can give the board flexibility, and the applicant can ask for a continuance and can always say, okay, board, I've heard you, I understand what your concerns are, I understand that you want me to go back to the Architectural Design Review Committee and work out X, Y, Z issues, and can we continue my application to this public hearing to the following month? So there's, you know, and I think a wise applicant would do that, to say, look, I'm already in the process, I understand what the board wants, I don't want to risk a potential denial, I will continue and see if I can work that out. I can also tell you, on the projects that I brought through in my previous life, before I do the position I did now, when the city was selling land to a developer and we were bringing them through, we knew we were going to bring them through the planning board process, we would often bring them to the Architectural Design Review Committee for a consultation before they were ever an applicant. And applicants have that ability to do that. I think I remember remarking during a recent application that we took the new employment security building, which is Isabella Apartments, to ADR 3 times. The feedback was excellent. We ended up with a better product. The community's better for it. And that building works because, as you heard in the architectural design guidelines, it's a large building, so it was soft colors, unlike other buildings that you've had come through recently that were not soft colors, that are very large buildings. So that's the other thing that we can try and counsel with applicants of hey, look, you know, it might be appropriate to do this. Now, applicants are generally impatient, and they're always kind of
All about
last
money.
minute. And that's not a criticism of the applicants, it's just the experience of the way the world is, because everybody's rushing, because everybody's busy. But I think there's some options there of how the board could, how the staff could engage with applicants and counsel applicants to maybe go to ADR first for a consultation if the applicant's schedule allows, or how the board could suggest that maybe the applicant might want to seek a continuance if they're in the process and they're up against the 65-day clock, and see if the applicant is willing to give, an additional 30 days on the hope they can work it out, and get to a place that works for the board and for the applicant and for ADR. And there are going to be some cases where, the board's going to be in a difficult position and the applicant's going to like the design the way that it is, and they're not going to want the feedback from ADR, and the board's going to have to make a decision about if that's acceptable or not for the interests of the community.
I mean, there's a lot of, go back to site organization and site layout and the site development, the setback from the street, the building alignment, the building spacing, the building siting. There's a lot of ambiguity there that it's going to be them doing it. Architectural design review, it would be us and them, but it's going to be architectural design review reviewing it, giving them feedback, and them coming to the planning board, and we may not have any of those same concerns. Again, we're not architects, but we know what we like, we know what we kind of know what we're doing from certain pieces and parts, and I don't know where it kind of, it's almost too broad. There's almost too much responsibility here.
Well, the planning board is the decider.
Sure.
And design review committee is advisory to planning board. And ultimately, it's the planning board's decision. So you can make the decision based on what you think the merits of the application are and your own judgment, but you do have advice from ADR. Very similar to city council process, where city council has a gazillion advisory committees.
Yeah.
They provide advice to the city council, but ultimately it's the city council's decision on what the city council wants to do. So.
Well, I'd be interested to hear, I don't just want to step in the middle here, I apologize, but I'd be interested to hear what you guys think from where are your strengths, where are your weaknesses, where do you think your best time is spent on producing a product that comes up to the planning board for approval? Is it in site layouts and I mean, it's everything, I understand that, and everything checks a box when you go through it, but there's a lot of boxes to be checked, and that seems like signs are obviously a big piece of that puzzle, but how much time and energy spent on site design, layout, landscape, things like that? I mean, I've been to enough meetings in the past where it's part of it, but they're mostly sign meetings that seems like I was at.
Yeah, if I can jump in, I mean, I don't want us to be like the sign committee, who just signs.
No.
Because I think there's a portion of our meeting, and I think we do add a lot of input to signs, but I think buildings are definitely part of it, that tie to the landscape and tie to the site. We do have different people that have expertise in those pieces that I think speak up a little louder when it comes to those pieces, but I think we do review all those things. Some of those pieces are very engineering and can be almost a checkbox to some of that stuff, where some of it's more subjective of pathways and screening and those types of things, where I think we weigh in a little bit more on, if that helps answer your question.
I was going to say, a lot of what we look at is sort of holistic. So we're not looking at just this or just that. We're looking at it and how it relates to each other. And I mean, we're all design professionals. We do this 24 hours, 24/7. So we can probably digest the information and read it more quickly than people who don't do this all the time.
You can almost look at a project and say that's a well-designed project. It's got all the elements. You don't need to spend a lot of time. If you see something, then you go through, and if it's colors, if it's material, if it's window, whatever it might be, you can almost look at the plan set and say, this needs a little bit of focus, or this needs a little bit of attention.
We're pretty quick at digesting things, yeah.
Again, you're comfortable with all the pieces and parts that Anne Marie laid out as far as.
Well, that's what we've been working with.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, what do you think, Doug?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that list is there naturally you can tell if you have a good professional, because they've dealt with it.
Check it
just
off.
we're just trained to read for that, so you can kind of recognize where everything works, and then you might have one thing that might be off, and that's what we comment on or something. or just we're asking, you know, what was the thought behind entering the site here or something, and that's what we're trying to understand, because we're also looking at how citizens will be approaching the site and everything like that, you know, and whether it makes sense for, you know, for the way that we know that things work in the town, so.
And I think we appreciate that, because there's a certain point where we're not asking, why did you cite the entrance in this particular location? Other than Jeff might ask that question, but we typically won't ask that question because again, we're looking at it in a different guise. We're looking at it through different eyes. And as long as there's a set of eyes looking at that to question it, or to at least understand that, well, there's a berm over here and there's a utility easement over here, so I understand why they're doing that. And you might not even get asked. You might be able to look at the plans and figure it out. And we could as well, but it's refreshing to be able to kind of have that extra set of eyes that's looking at it and giving us something to kind of gloss over if we can. So, anything, Ron, any?
I was just thinking about the word arbitrary, and I don't think we make many, if any, arbitrary decisions.
Mm-hmm.
It's all based on something,
Okay.
typically guidelines.
Yeah. Okay.
And I would concur, I know I have only been here not quite a year, but I think the committee does an admirable job, outstanding even, they cite guidelines, and you can tell that they're design professionals, and they're not just pulling something out of their hat because they just don't like the color pink. They have a reason, and it generally ties in with.
And that's what I was going to ask, is a lot of times when I read through the minutes, you all have your opinions and it's stated, but I know now in the way we're doing it, we have statement of fact, and this is why we did it this way. I'm wondering if there's like the obscure ones, like a site layout or something, if you could say, this is how we want to see it, and specifically state, because of section 2 of the architectural design guidelines. So it's very clear, it's not a personal opinion, it's your, and I'm wondering if that tightens it a little bit, because then when it comes to us, we're looking and going, oh, okay, that's under section 2. If I want to double check section 2, okay, I see where it's coming. Not that I want to make more work, but I know we're being asked to really define why certain things are happening.
If I can jump in, though, I think recently that has kind of bitten us a little bit because people have misused our section that we've called out to refer to other pieces in that, and saying that they have satisfied the recommendation.
The intent of the regulation,
Which was not our intent.
Okay. Yeah.
Because some of these are, they're big statements in a lot of these sections. So we try to say things, but I think there's a lot more backup you have to read above to understand why we're saying those things.
I guess just any guidance that you can give us to what's in here, more than just what gets on the paper sometimes, for me would be helpful, because sometimes I look at it and I have a different eye. I'm an engineer, I won't disagree, but I have thought architecturally about stuff, not the same way. I'm not trained that way, but pathways and things. And sometimes I look at stuff and go, gee, what were they really thinking when they answered this? Because I'm not getting it from the meeting notes. You know?
Well, we've had a rep from the planning board on our committee now for close to a year. But that's another very helpful way of communicating some of the harder to grasp nuances of our discussion that show up in the minutes versus being at the table at the
You
time.
notice why I sit next to her every night, for that very reason.
Oh, exactly. No, I think it's, if I may, that I've been able to give some context in situations when something did come back to ADR as to, of course, we have the meeting minutes, but I can recount the feeling, or maybe someone who wasn't there at the last meeting or didn't read. So I try to give context to it, more or less, and especially when something that did come back, and I can't remember the specific instance, but it was like, oh, well, this was months ago, said to come back, the applicant said they wanted a continuation, now they've come back with their revisions, and it was help bring that, tie that together.
So we're going to wrap up, but I did want to mention, again, the piece on architectural features and details, the materials and colors, again, subjective, but to I think Jeff's point, and Liz, you were instrumental in this, but the project on Pleasant Street and Liberty and Pleasant, Pleasant Street.
Oh, Coalition for the
Coalition,
Homeless.
so that project where it gets stripped to the bare bones and rebuilt, you know, I had somebody after the fact, 6 months after the fact, looking at the building saying, oh, you guys did a great job, you put the cupola back, you did this, you did this, you did this, you did this. But they asked me, they said, if I owned the property, I would have filed for a demolition permit, demolished the property, and built what I wanted to build on the property. And that's some of the stuff that I struggle with, because I don't have the, you know, I want it to stay. I want them to be able to reuse the property as it sits. But I want to be able to have enough guidelines around it to make it feasible for them to retrofit it and use it without having the stick to be able to say, you've got to put dental molding up there, and you've got to put 6/6 windows, and you've got to put a working cupola, and you've got to do this and this and this and this and this, and rebuild the chimneys. So there's some give and take, and you guys recognize that, and we recognize that as well. And sometimes we'll, you know, well, that would be great if we could do that, but we can't do that, and here's the reasons. And again, we struggle with that. I know you guys do as well, but I appreciate the fact that we want to rely on the regulations, but at some point we want to make sure that we're not hindering the progress or the project itself, not the progress, but the
No,
project
of course,
itself.
and I think that goes back to Matt's comment earlier, that if we can, the earlier we can see something
Yeah.
before anything has happened to the building, and we often end up saving an applicant money by being able to give suggestions, because perhaps they thought we would interpret something as it looks colonial, which isn't anything that we would ever ask for, but
Right,
the
right.
perception is there, we might.
Yep.
And so they'll come in with a plan with all this overblown colonial features, and that gives us a chance to say,
Don't do that.
not necessary.
Okay.
I have
Great. Yes.
a question. On process, how do you all get one before it comes to us? I mean, I heard somebody say the planning board should say to an applicant, go to ADR and talk to them
Well, they
before
get
you
it
even
from
start.
staff.
Or is it the staff?
Yeah.
I assume it's the staff.
Right, when somebody wants to have a project, they'll come
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
the
so you all
planning
are the
staff, and
ones
they'll
who
say,
say,
you
go
need to go to
them.
zoning, you need to go to ADR, and then you can come to the planning board.
And we will do a better job of reminding applicants that
So if
that
somebody,
opportunity is available.
if someone comes in and they need to go to ADR, do they get a copy of this dreadful looking architectural design review guideline?
It's on the website.
So they don't get it, so they don't know, okay.
So the city standards, but sometimes they come in with the wrong ones in the plan set.
Is it possible to let them know they need to go on the website and look at it?
Yeah, or here's a form that they could
Yeah,
check a
or
box
a form
off,
that
yeah.
they've checked
Yeah.
off and
As
they've
it's
done
part of
it.
the application. Did you get these?
Yep, and
Did you
did
look
you-
at these?
did you review?
Did you look
Yeah.
at the zoning ordinance? Did you, almost like a little check
All right,
mark
let's,
with the
Yeah,
application?
I
let's-
have one more
Yep,
question,
yep.
that this is more from the developer's point of view. So if, back to the process, it goes to ADR and then it's virtually a week, maybe 10 days between what they've recommended to the developer and they're coming to us with any changes that they may make after ADR, would it be better for the developer if ADR met closer to the time it's filed, so the developer maybe has 2 to 3 weeks to make any revisions before they come to us? Because you're not going, it sounds like they don't go back to ADR, so it's up to us to
Right.
either say, we want you to make those changes, or, oh gosh, you did a great job, you listened to ADR. So I just wonder if that window needs to be wider for the developer.
I think that from what we've seen, I think that the window is wide enough for them to be able to make the revisions and resubmit to staff, because there've been a number of applicants that have gone to ADR and they've had suggestions, and they've gotten us their revisions
Days
in
later,
enough
yeah.
time for us to
Okay,
do
and
the
in
staff
time
report.
for them to get the revision so it's
Yeah.
in our packet,
Yep,
not
So-
at the last minute.
yep.
Yeah.
So one more question, and then we're gonna cut it off, but if we had a plan set that came to ADR, ADR just hated everything there was to do with it. They said, we're not gonna recommend approval of this to the planning board. The applicant the clock is 30 days, that once they come to ADR, that they have to bring it to the planning board?
Well, it has to go to planning board, an application has to go to planning board within 30 days of
Okay.
being submitted.
So
But the
if-
applicant can request a continuance, like Matt said, the applicant has,
they can keep doing it months
Yes.
and months. So that was my
Yep.
question. So if they're presented at ADR, we don't like this project, we're gonna recommend denial from the planning board. You can come back next month and we can review it at your request, or you can see where the apples fall.
yep,
Okay.
the applicant would be the one that would have to request the continuance.
I'm sorry, but one question just to follow up on that if I could real quick. Is ADR recommendation a requirement of the completeness review?
Yes, I can answer that.
So that they say they're not gonna recommend it, we don't have to accept it, the clock doesn't
Well,
start.
no, it's the recommendation. It's not a recommendation of approval or
It's just
denial,
a
it's
recommendation.
just the
Okay, thank you,
recommendation.
that's what I just want clarification, because I was thinking, oh, there's an avenue, but, okay,
We
Good
looked in-
thought.
We looked into that once before.
okay,
Not
thank you.
making a recommendation at all, but.
Yep, that's fine.
So I just want to make sure I understand this. So I'm going to take a specific example, which is the patch project. And that one came in with, literally, you know, one problem after another. And every single one of us had one problem or another, but not everybody had the same problem. So with that one, because the process had started and the developer sat right here and said, you know, we've got time on the design. And so with that, what would we have done as a board? Would we have said to the developer right then and there, would you like to request a continuance so these issues can be worked out? So would we, I guess my question is, would we have said to the developer, would you like to make a request for continuance so these things can be worked out and you bring it back to us?
You're talking
next
the
month?
catch.
The catch bill.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was a little bit different only because, and you correct me if I'm wrong, and I usually am, but it was more than just architectural design review. It was funding on their side where they needed
But then
approvals.
they'd already sold it.
They needed approvals to get some funding to.
Yeah, but they sold
Okay,
it,
yeah,
which
that's
we
right.
didn't know. Until 3
And
weeks
that
later.
one-
But the point, but forget about the funding part, but the
Well, there's
question is.
two things you could have done,
can-
Teresa.
I guess I'm asking
Yeah.
legitimately if we can suggest to them that they do it.
You can suggest, yeah.
I mean,
you
can we do
suggest
that?
Or
Well, so in that case, that specific case, they came to you, it was a major site plan, they asked you to do it in one night instead of two.
And
So you
that-
weren't
yeah.
accepting and then having the public hearing
That's
later.
what I was gonna say, is you could have denied the waiver.
They truncated that, you could have denied the waiver, and then you could have also denied, you could have approved the site plan, which was recommended, and
Right.
denied the
Right.
architectural, which was
Mhm.
recommended. But I think that night, being here, I think the board was just confused about what was honestly within its purview.
Right,
And I
I
think there
agree
was
with that.
confusion about things like size, mass, color, materials, and the fact that you were under pressure because the applicant was asking you to rush because of this deadline with funding. And I think that's why that went the way it went.
Yeah. Alex?
I would just add that the 65-day clock
Yeah.
starts when you determine a complete. You have the authority, you don't need the applicant's consent, I understand, right, to continue within that window at the 65-day mark, and this, all of our soft reports have that date at the very beginning. At the 65-day mark, you as the board need to approve, conditionally approve or deny, unless you and the applicant mutually agree to. Okay. And that's where the applicant drives it beyond 65 days. But you have a lot of purview in this.
But we
we need
can't
to
continue
stop.
it
We need to
without
stop.
them agreeing.
Not after the
We need to
clock.
move on, sorry. All right, Mr. Walsh.
So we're switching gears
We're
to
switching
zoning?
gears
Okay.
to the recommendation or the proposed amendment changes that we've been discussing, we discussed last month.
So, in your packet, you have a very basic memo from me and then a revised ordinance, which is annotated with comments. So, I don't know, Mr. Mayor,
Mr.
sorry.
Mayor, oh, please.
Hey, you got a promotion.
We were here, Councilor Todd and I were here until
Running?
10:30 last night, so we were confused. I don't know if you want me to go through page by page or how you would
If
like
you
me
can
to
give us a
describe this.
truncated version, or if you can kind of, everybody got it, everybody
Yep.
reviewed it. Hopefully, everybody reviewed it.
So the major revisions here are, one, we've added definition of development program, which is in the glossary, so that's been added. We've incorporated references to the Main Street Design Guidelines and other guidelines, architectural design guidelines that you have, so that's here. We've made it a little more flexible relative to 65 feet and the step, so you still have to do it. but we're recommending some additional changes in the ordinance. There was a provision that already governed that in the zoning ordinance. So we stripped out the provision that was adopted by the council in August, and we'd like to reference the existing provision and modify it, so we only have one provision that deals with that instead of two slightly different provisions, which we think are already causing problems. So we'd like to do that. If you go on in here, there's some commentary about, there were some suggestions about definition of things like vibrancy, vitality, skyline. We are not recommending definitions of those. The zoning ordinance specifically includes language in the glossary that says if it's not defined in the glossary, you rely on the common definition of those things. We think those are concepts that are already evident, so we haven't recommended any changes there. We are recommending some clarification to language about the height of buildings on South Main Street in the area of the Isabella Apartments building, that it will be 90 feet from the elevation of South Main Street. So we are clarifying that language, which was discussed during the public hearing. We have provided some explanation about the concept of needing 15 feet or less of frontage on North State Street or certain areas of the Central Business District, whereby that the 90-foot CUP is not eligible. So that is described on page 6. We have taken the language. I think a couple of the big ones here are relative to the ability to go from 80 to 90 feet in the Central Business Performance District. We have added some language in here, which is slightly different than what was suggested by Liz, but you can see that on page 7 in relative to this historic issue. So we already had language in that section that said if you wanted to demolish a building and replace it and go to 90 feet in the Central Business Performance District, we've added language. We've taken the language that's already in there, which was the existing building or structure is not a viable, the applicant has demonstrated, sufficiently demonstrated, and there's other language already about providing technical studies and other documentation, but demonstrated that the building or structure is not a viable candidate for preservation, rehabilitation, and adaptive reuse due to the building or structure's condition, characteristics, or other circumstances. And we have added language that says the demolition of the existing building or structure will not result in a significant adverse impact on historical, cultural, or architectural resources in the community. That parallels basically what RSA 7090 is for community revitalization tax credit. So we've added that language in there. And then if you go to pages 8, 9, pages 8 and 9 are governed related to section 28.548 in the zoning ordinance, which are special performance standards for the Central Business Performance District. And we are proposing making changes in here relative to views of the State House Dome, which is a housekeeping item, and some build-to line issues, which is related to the 65-foot step issue. But we've also suggested that if we're going to make some modifications to this section, the board might want to also consider taking control on some issues about other items in the Central Business Performance District and managing those through a conditional use permit. Which means that they would not go to the zoning board, they would come to the planning board to be addressed. And those types of things are multifamily dwellings permitted in the Central Business Performance District that, unless a conditional use permit's been approved by the planning board, you can't have any ground floor units. So we've run across this in the past, and a good example is the Kearsarge building on South State Street that was redeveloped. They have ground floor units. They had to go to the zoning board. It would have been easier, I think, to handle it with the planning board. Parking lots in this, the Central Business Performance District. The Isabella Apartments and Employment Security had to go through a bunch of variances. It probably would have been better to handle it through the planning board and conditional use permit because a parking lot's not allowed within 100 feet of Main Street and other streets. Some dimensional requirements, we're suggesting that, but also if you go to page 9F, there's a housekeeping item in there about the views of the State House Dome, which should have been caught by me the last time around, but it wasn't. And then G, talking about the conditional use permit process and the requirement to step the building back in the Central Business Performance District on a front lot line at a height of 65 feet. So in the past, that provision only pertained to Main Street, North and South Main Street, Store Street, Pleasant Street Extension. So we just talked about the Catch project on State Street. That building was not stepped back at 65 feet because State Street wasn't one of the streets listed in the Central Business Performance District. So our correction here is, gee, if we're going to get more of this downtown, we should probably take the opportunity here to broaden the number of streets. So we've broadened it to all the primary streets really in the Central Business District to say you're going to build to the front lot line, and you're going to step it back at 65 feet to make sure that the next thing that comes in that's like that on the Catch project, we don't have to deal with that again. And this provision applies whether you're building within the 80-foot height limit that exists or if you're going to 90. So, so it covers both of those things. So we've created some flexibility there. At the same time, because we're going to manage it through a conditional use permit, if somebody comes to you and says, well, gee, I can only step back 10 feet along 80% of the frontage of the building because there's something that I'm trying to do from an architectural design perspective, or I really need to have my stair tower, my elevator tower here, or something like that. We're giving the board the flexibility to say, okay, we understand that, and we're going to let you do that. Where if you don't do that through the conditional use permit, you'd have to send them to the zoning board, and that's probably just unnecessary, and it's more of a design item that the board should really, the planning board should be dealing with rather than the zoning board. And then if you go to page 10, you'll see that we're also dealing with some other performance standards in the Central Business District about building entrances at the street level, and the prohibition about swinging out onto a sidewalk or plaza with a doorway. We had a real life example with O's Steak and Seafood years ago. We're trying to clean that up. And then ground floor transparency, again, giving the board more control over that through a conditional use permit, which I think the board would use judiciously. And then lastly, there's a definition of development program on page 10, which is defined there, which everybody can see. So those are the changes that we have made.
So I read through 9G, build to lines several times, and well done as far as the language, because I couldn't find a way to get there without all of the, unless a conditional use permit is, and I think it reads, it's tough to read, but it's appropriately complex for a complex issue, and trying to address it in different areas. One thing that I do know was mentioned in private arcades, terraces, and balconies. Balconies appropriately conditional use permitted, so we can do the same thing with those if it's again hanging over a public sidewalk or
Parking lot structures. Which section are you at, Mr.
I'm in 9G, number 2, comment 2. An applicant for a conditional use permit for private arcades, terraces, or balconies shall provide adequate documentation to the planning board to make the findings proposed improvements. I just am thinking of like the Remy's block when we want to put it, or not Remy's, there was a development right above, right near Phoenix Hall that wanted to put balconies over the sidewalk.
Correct, and I think in this case, this talks about you will build to the front lot line.
Yeah.
But the board can give some flexibility on that. And yes, the board would have some control over those sorts of things if the applicant needed a conditional use permit.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Right.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I have one. I noticed on 2I, you made this reference to all these different streets being added to cover yourself in the Central Business District, but on page 10 under, I'm sorry, not 2, sorry, 9I, there's a very much shorter, limited, it's almost like going back to the shorter list of sheets. So page 10, 9I, ground floor occupancy and transparency section. It has the very limited, and I'm wondering, should we use the same list? It makes sense to use that same list that you had up, which expanded here as there, because you're talking about building up to the front and everything.
So you'll notice that none of that language, that those streets are existing in the ordinance already. I think what this section of the ordinance is really talking about, it's geared towards the mercantile streets in downtown. And so that's why those are listed there. North Main Street, South Main Street, Pleasant Extension, Village Street up in Pennacook, Warren Street.
Right, no Store Street though.
Store Street, it should be something we should think about adding, absolutely. if the board wants to add more streets there, then they should do that.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we're talking about some of those other streets you named, Eagle Street and Village Street and all these other ones, should there be consistency if the intent of the other one is that those buildings may become commercial on those other streets, should it apply here? There's just something to think about.
Yep.
It also makes it easier to track for us.
If that's something that the board wants to do, they can do that. They're similar concepts, but they're different. One's dealing with height and pedestrian scale. The other one's dealing with areas where it's more mercantile activity. I don't know if you're going to necessarily get that on some streets. Park Street, for example, maybe you would. Capitol Street, not so much because of its nature, because it's more offices and state offices. School Street, not so much because you've got a parking garage there. So it does vary. But if the board wants to be consistent and list all the streets, then so be it.
At a minimum, I think Store Street should potentially be added, because we've talked about how we want those to be ground floor retail and above residential.
I would not disagree with you on Store Street. Yeah.
Councilor Todd.
Yeah, thank you. I want to recognize we only had about 7 minutes to discuss all this. So
No, take your time.
well, we got our other meeting going.
Yeah.
But I've got a couple of things, and including something that I heard from residents who actually read this, believe it or not, and had some comments. But I want to say, first of all, just thanks to Matt, because this is once again another exercise where we can see the value of his expertise, and I think we've really come a long way with this document, refining it, and it'll be a better end product, I think, as a result. And thanks to Liz Hengen, because the suggestions that originally emanated from her August 6th letter to council have been helpful, and I think they've also encapsulated the concerns that were expressed by community members. I keep thinking about the 28 pieces of correspondence that the planning board received back in April, where folks were concerned about loss of historic structures, dome views, and that kind of thing. But I want to just turn to the concerns the staff expressed regarding the reference to the National State Register of Historic Places in this CUP. So it's on page 7 of the draft. It's comment WM20. So first, it seems that a national or state register designation will actually make it easier, I'm thinking, for the planning board to determine whether or not a building is actually historic. And these register determinations were made like 25 years ago, I think, through work the city had done. So I'm not sure why we wouldn't want to use them since they already exist. The comment says staff has proposed alternate language in the draft which mimics that included within RSA 79E, but 79E in fact defines historic structures as, quote, a building that is listed on or determined eligible for listing on the National Register of Historic Places or the State Register of Historic Places, which is actually the language that is suggested in Liz Hengen's letter to be included. So I think including that register language actually does mimic 79E. My third comment was, again in WM20, staff's concern is that including a reference would have hypothetically likely caused problems for the bindery, employment security, and Sears block as to this application to the CUP. But I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that the bindery and employment security buildings were not part of the historic district, and they were not listed on the National Register as contributing properties. The Sears block was. That was originally called the Colonial block. That was 2 buildings. They were in the historic district and listed on the National Register, I believe. But my recollection, I think Matt can confirm, the condition of the Sears block was probably worse than that of the EMP building, which, as staff points out, also in comment WM20, the Heritage Commission unanimously agreed that it was not a significant contributing property, and I think a big part of that decision was based on the building condition. So it seems to me that if the Sears owner, hypothetically again, had been able to apply for this CUP, it's likely that a National Register reference in the ordinance would not have been a factor, just as it wasn't for the EMP building, because I think they would have taken the condition issues into account. And I'll also note that I specifically asked Mr. Siborowski during his testimony at the August 12th council meeting, do you think there are any recommendations in Liz Hengen's 8-6 letter that would create a barrier for your project? And his answer was no. So I don't know, I guess, you know, we don't have a lot of time to get into a lot of discussion. I'd like to have more time, because I'd like to have staff to kind of explain more about how National Register reference would have caused problems, and the other things I mentioned. But I just want to say that even if including a reference to National Register could impose an extra hurdle for a potential developer to demolish a building, I guess my question would be, don't we want that for these historic buildings? Because, and the answer, I think, is we must, because Section 8 of the master plan highlights the care to be taken with this area of our downtown. So my suggestion would be to put the National Register language in, national and state, thinking that we could always change it later if the results we want for new projects don't materialize. And then in the interim, the city will be going through the master plan process to further refine our vision for the future of this area. And I can suggest, for example, and I think others have suggested it too, that we could be looking at focusing on redevelopment, let's say on the east side of South Main Street from theater to stores, which is outside of the historic district. And we can do that either by including that area in the CVP or designating a new district where we might actually focus additional incentives for redevelopment. So I think, you know, again, that's, you know, the original, I always go with the original staff report on this from April that Matt wrote. And on page 5, it says the impact to historic buildings is difficult to predict. That's a quote. I think that adding the reference to National State Register of Historic Places will eliminate some of that unpredictability. So that's my recommendation. I don't know if you have any thoughts
I
on
would
that.
agree with that, that's all I'm going to say.
Okay. Liz or Jay or Ron or nothing?
I have nothing else to add.
Thank you, Matt, for
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Yeah, there's
staff.
a lot of really great things in this ordinance.
Okay.
Yeah. So, process-wise,
So I think, the best thing to do, I recognize that you're out of time,
we're gonna,
is before this goes back to the city council, the planning board should hold a public hearing on it.
yes.
And I guess the question is, and it sounds like we're just down to this, if I'm paraphrasing incorrectly, correct me. It sounds like we're probably just down to the National Register provision. And, you know, I think the concern from staff has been that, my recollection was Bindery and employment security did have historic issues that were an issue. And in fact, I think with the employment security, the state even tried to condition the building on being preserved when they sold it to the city, and we said no. And there was a whole study about historic mid-century modern buildings that went along with that. But I think if you want, then I guess the thing to do would be to, for the sake of time, perhaps take Ms. Hengen's suggestion there in I on page 7 of 11 in the comment, MW20 or WM20, and then maybe put it in there and then leave the other, and then, you know, perhaps keep the existing building structure not viable candidate, and then it's going to be down to the applicant to demonstrate that.
Could you give us two versions? I mean, could you give us two versions?
This one and
or the
one
whole
with the-
thing with
yeah.
two, with, you know, option 1 for this paragraph,
Yeah.
option 2 for this paragraph?
Yeah.
Open it up to the public hearing, again, have some more testimony from
Sure.
the board, without the clock
No, I
ticking
think-
on the background.
I think that's an elegant solution,
And then
and it will move the process forward.
Make the process
Yeah.
forward. So
Yep.
again, just for the record, what we're gonna do is we're gonna recommend that if everything, so we'll do a little roundtable here, if everybody's okay with that. It will be put on the agenda for the November planning board meeting. We'll notice it. It will be a public hearing. People will be able to come in, give testimony to it, and we'll vote it up or down to go to city council with either A or B version of the change. Okay with that?
I'm fine with that. I did have a couple of other things, though, so how could we address getting those in or talking about those?
Are they gonna fundamentally change the language that's in here?
Well, not fundamentally maybe, but possibly it could make some adjustments.
So-
I mean, that,
We could make those adjustments at the public hearing level at that point, be able to
okay.
talk to them.
So I'll hold on to these until the next meeting.
Present them, I mean, this is the big one, so present
so.
them, and then be able to make recommendations to staff to make the changes, and then not see it again and be done with it.
It's possible to see those in advance.
Sure.
Yeah, is it possible to see what your other concerns are in advance?
I can do that. Is there a
You
mechanism
can
for
send
that?
them to Anne Marie, and then
Email
Anne
them to
Marie
me,
will
and
post them
then-
as part of the
and I
agenda.
will,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, because as I say, excuse me, one of them was from a member of the public also, so I just want to make sure that we touch on that.
All right, great.
So, yeah.
Okay, so with that, we're good, Matt? We're good, Anne Marie? Okay, so we'll close this meeting up, and we will take a 5-minute quick break and get reset with staff, and we will go from there. Yes,
Can I
Jay?
just say thank you very much? We're here to really,
Absolutely.
we exist to help you guys out, so.
You're
anything
welcome
you
to
wanna
stay
send
for the
us-
next meeting if you want to stay and see the process in action. And members of the public will be back in 5 minutes for the planning board meeting. Sorry for the delay. Call this meeting to order. We are at 7:10. This is the Wednesday, October 16th meeting of the Concord City Planning Board. Madam Clerk, could you call the roll?
Yes. Rosenberger.
Here.
Hicks.
Here.
Savage.
Here.
Santa Cruz.
Here.
Todd.
Here.
And Woodfin.
Here. Okay, we have a quorum. We'll open up the meeting. First item on the agenda tonight is to approve the minutes of the September Planning Board meeting, the September 18th meeting, and the minutes of the joint work session Planning Board Architectural Design Review Committee meeting. Would someone like to make a motion to approve those minutes as submitted?
So moved.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Quick agenda overview for those of you out in the audience looking to hear items 6A, 7A, and 7B. Those have all been continued to the November 20th meeting. That 6A is a determination of completeness for 20 South Main Street as a major subdivision plan. 7A was a minor site plan for 72 Manchester Street at the Red Blazer. And 7B is a site plan for 287 Loudon Road. So again, if anyone's here for those projects, those will not be heard tonight. They will be heard on the at the November 20th meeting. Do we need a motion to continue or no?
Yes, please.
Would someone like to make a motion to continue those items again, 6A, 7A, and 7B to the November meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Will move us right on to the consent agenda items. Again, in our packet of info, if you're here on items 5A, 5B, 5C, 5D, 5E, and 5F is 5F, right? Yes. If you're here on any of those items tonight, those are review applications by consent, which means we've reviewed them, Architectural Design Review has reviewed them, recommended changes. If you have any opposition to any of the signs that are on there, if you could make yourself known. If not, any member of the board have any of those items that you'd like to pull from consent? If not, we'll take a motion to approve those design review applications by consent with Architectural Design Review recommendations.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries and moves us on to item 6 in our agenda, determination of completeness items by consent. Again, consent agenda items are reviewed. We have 2 of them on the agenda, 6A, which was pulled, and 6B. So we have one item, TF Moran on behalf of Interchange Development requests approvals for a major site plan architectural design review and certain waivers of the site plan regulation for a full-service restaurant with an outdoor seating area and attached retail space and associated site improvements at 10 Merchants Way in the Gateway Performance District. Again, this is a determination of completeness component. No public testimony tonight. We'll set the public hearing if it's determined complete for next month. Did I miss anything, Anne Marie?
You did not.
Okay.
This
So
one is a development of regional impact, so let's be sure and
So
state
staff
that.
has determined that the application is complete and is a development of regional impact. Would someone like to make a motion to find the application complete, a development of regional impact, and set the public hearing for the November 20th meeting of the Planning Board?
So moved.
Second.
Tiring you out with all my talking, huh? Motions are made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. That moves us out of our.
Chairman, may I
Yes,
ask a question?
certainly.
Because we were talking about the clock before, and I think it's different, Alec knows, it's different for DRIs, correct?
That's 30 days.
I just want to make sure
Yes.
that people know
You have
that.
an additional 30 days.
Yep.
Somebody's reading the rights.
Okay, moves us out of the moves us out of our consent agenda into the public hearing section. And again, public hearings 7A and 7B are off the record for tonight. They'll be heard next month. So we'll move right to 7C. If we can read that into the record, Madam Clerk? I'll make you do some work now.
Okay.
Stop talking.
Nobis Group, on behalf of Brixmore Capital SC LLC, requests approvals for a minor site plan application, architectural design review, and certain waivers from the site plan regulations for a 2,850 square foot addition to the existing commercial building at 80 Storrs Street in the Opportunity Corridor Performance District.
All right, if we could get a quick staff update on this project.
Okay. This project was set to be heard last month. The applicant continued it to address items in the staff report and did an admirable job addressing everything. Staff is recommending to determine it complete. There were a couple of waivers that staff is recommending denying, and that was mainly because they were requesting to waive the entire thing rather than a specific construction detail. So just this afternoon, they sent me an email and they struck the waiver for section 15.011. They provided additional reasons for the non-supported staff waivers, section 16.0222, 18.20, 22.08, 25.021. They clarified the construction detail waiver for only the dumpsters and concrete sidewalk, and they added a separate PDF for explanations. They also added a waiver request for section 20.02 screening of loading areas. I will be very honest in saying that the email came in at 2:20 and I simply have not had time to review that, nor was I able to forward it to Planning Commission. So I'd recommend, if it pleases the board, to go forward, determine it complete, open the public hearing, and then perhaps continue to the next hearing so staff can review all those and revise the staff report accordingly.
So in the recommendation, we've got to state that the project does not meet the criteria for development of regional impact. That's still appropriate, right?
Correct.
Okay, so again, there is a determination of a determination of completeness component, and it has been determined by staff to not be a development of regional impact. Would someone like to make a motion to determine the application complete and open a public hearing?
So moved.
I'll second that. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Public hearing is open. Welcome to the table. If you guys could state your names for the record. It is terribly hot in here, isn't it? Sorry, Chris, go ahead. State your names if you could.
Chris Neighbor with Novus Group.
Mark Newman with Brixmore Property Group.
Sean Lau with Cleary Architecture.
All right, sorry.
Start? Okay.
Go
Hello,
ahead.
everybody. How's everybody doing tonight?
Doing well. How are you?
Good, thank you.
You missed our meeting. We've been here since 2 o'clock talking all kinds of fun stuff.
I'm with Brixmore Property Group, which is the company that owns the shopping center. And so this basically is about 4 or 5 years ago, Burlington Coat Factory, now known as Burlington, approached us, which they've been doing across the country at all their stores, requesting to reduce in size. They're in 77,000 square feet today. They take up the entirety of that building, that rectangle in the middle. And we've been working with them for the last 4 or 5 years to try to put together a plan to downsize them and to backfill this space to bring enough new tenants forward to actually go forward and take action on it. And we were able to do that finally, pulling together what we believe is a great group of tenants, and we've signed leases with them to take a portion of the space in front. We've got Ulta, Boot Barn, and Five Below. We have the back, we do not yet have a tenant for that space, but this is basically a plan to break up an anchor box. And we're doing this across our portfolio, especially with Burlington. We're downsizing them wherever they're located. They're reducing in size by about 65 to 70%, which is what's happening across the board. If we weren't able to accommodate that, they would have left, and we would have been left in the lurch, losing value. So this plan, we see it as a great plan, a great way to upgrade the center, and a great way to get rid of fairly obsolete, larger retail space. The plan requires the big changes here, and I'm going to hand it off to my engineer to give more detail about it, but the big changes really, at the end of the day, besides the splitting of the space, is that we had to square off this space on the left where you see Five Below and add 2,850 square feet to properly square it off. Right now, that space pushes back and doesn't have the same frontage that the space next to it does. And we needed to add a sidewalk in the rear, an ADA sidewalk that you see off to the left rear to what would be this new entrance for potential gym use or other use. The ADA sidewalk is a code requirement. The only other changes are some changes to the loading dock from what was the existing loading dock for Burlington to a new loading dock on the side and a new loading dock in the rear. And then a facade renovation. Part of the project is renovating the facade for all, basically, all 4 sides of the Burlington box.
Sorry to interrupt, so
Yeah.
the gym is the tenant on the plans, you show just tenant, right?
That's the one that it says.
So it's up in the
Gym.
top left-hand corner there, that's where it's gonna say, that's where the signage tenant is, right?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
And just, you can imagine, retailers wanted the space in front.
Sure, yeah.
We've had a harder time finding retailers in the back for the rear space. And that's always the challenge when you take an anchor space like this and split it up. So we appeared, the new ADA sidewalk and some of the other small modifications resulted in a loss of 31 parking spaces. On August 7th, we appeared before the Zoning Board of Appeals, and we got the parking reduction approved. We also got all of the proposed signage for the new stores in front and in the back and on the side, and the side one being especially important because we're hoping that that will attract a user for that rear space that doesn't have as much visibility to Store Street. That was all approved by the Zoning Board of Appeals, as well as a rear setback for 73 square foot loading dock. And on September 3rd, we appeared before the ADR with our plan for the facade renovation. The ADR approved it subject to certain changes, and we've made all those changes already. So what you will see when we show you the facade renderings are after the ADR has had us make some adjustments to it. Do you want to maybe, should we?
Yeah,
Scroll through or add anything?
I just wanted to add, out back is really challenging. There's not a lot of room. We've only got about 24 feet of property out back. There was a land swap many, many years ago between the railroad and the center owners, where the railroad took some of the property out back. They granted an easement to allow the shopping center to continue to use the paved area out there, but they didn't include the utilities in the easement. So we've been working for the past year or so with the railroad to try and get them to pin down the easements that we need for utilities, and to verify that we have access back there. They haven't been super easy to deal with.
Shocking as that is, not shocked to hear that at all.
We have had response from them. They need something else from us, so we know they're not going to ignore us forever.
They've gone radio silent a handful of times.
Right.
It's not just you, so.
Right, yeah, so we're working through those issues, and I think those were, that was one of the comments about not having a utility easement to connect to the sewer, which is actually the center's sewer line, but it's on the railroad's property. And the other was just the close proximity to the property line out back. We really had to suck the loading docks in as close as possible and show loading areas that would work and still meet the 10-foot setback from the property line.
So I have a question on the loading areas. I noticed on one of the plans here, I apologize, I don't remember which one it was, but it looked to me like there was no access through from Five Below to the back of the building. Is that right? Go back, so right there, so Five Below is in blue.
Yep.
I see the boot barn with an access. Is Five Below going to be able to get?
Yeah, we're adding a loading dock to the left next to Marshall's loading dock.
Oh, okay.
So you can see you barely see there's a little jut out here, and that'll be the loading dock. So Marshall's and Five Below will have 2 loading areas right side by side there on the side.
Okay.
And then the gym will have a loading area out back, which is that upper left-hand picture pointing, and then Alta and Boot Barn will share loading area off the orange.
Yep.
And we're moving Burlington's loading dock off to the right.
And these are all signed leases too. Alta, Boot Barn, the downsized Burlington, and Five Below are all executed leases. We did go through the process with each one of these tenants of confirming loading dock, logistics, as well as, the loading corridors and making sure that, spaces work for them.
And that little build out, it's 2,800 square feet, that's just that little dent-in area? I guess there's a wall there now, isn't there? Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
It was probably a garden center or something back when it was.
Exactly.
I can't even remember what it was.
Is it a service merchant?
I think it was at Ames or, yeah.
Ames, that's right, Ames.
Stairs.
Those Brits.
And before that, I think it
Howlands.
was J.J. Newberry before that. We have pictures of in the 60s. So that's the reason we're here, because of that infill trips minor site plan review requirements. Otherwise, we wouldn't be before the board. We just pull a building permit.
Lucky you, huh?
So, right, so that's basically, that's the story.
I want to talk about a couple of the waivers, but I don't want to get into the nitty gritty until we sort of get into that and explain.
Yeah, we thought we'd show you the pretty pictures first.
Yeah.
So that's how it looks today. This is how we're proposing it to look with the new facade renovation.
Jeff, can you see that?
Eyes are so close. Can't use my laser.
You can look at it up on the TV up there, it's just not big enough, so.
This would be facing Store Street from left to right, with Burlington on the right. The next one, this is that where Burlington, where the space jogs to the, a little further in towards, away from Store Street. This would be that side view. This would be the rear left view. This would be that rear anchor, that rear gym space, proposed gym space. That's the signage for what would be that new entrance.
Is there any access from that back parking lot to the front?
There's a sidewalk now that's ADA compliant, or will be.
Will be, yeah. We designed a
It
sidewalk.
goes right through between Marshalls and Five Below?
No, it goes behind
Around the whole building.
Marshalls. Yeah,
Okay.
between Marshalls and Bank of America.
Okay.
But, so no cut from the front.
Just think a
stores.
cut over like
You
by
can't get it all the
Staples.
way around.
By
You're filling
Staples,
that
there's a
in
little
and-
cut in there.
Right, and this is the rear, and so what we're proposing is that is the same on the right where it says tenant. That would be sort of that's the corner of what you had just seen a second ago, for that proposed gym use. And, it's prominent to attract a retailer, which has not been easy, and we're still at it, a user for the space. And to the left would be, what we're calling like the marquee signage for the tenants on the front, all sort of, working off of a uniform color scheme. And that's pretty much it.
Okay. Questions from the board? Jeff?
I do have a few. You're asking for a waiver for lighting plan, but you've got a user that's never had an entrance on this back corner, and that concerns me, that tenant corner. So I'll tell you right now, if I would not be considerable of doing a waiver of a lighting plan, because you're now adding an entrance, you're adding an ADA access, you're adding a crosswalk, and an area that is somewhat dark coming around the building, and that's adjacent to the railroad. And then with your new building storefront, you're potentially taking out some of the wall packs that are there. So that was one kind of I had. If you go to Plan C3, Chris? Yep. With the changes here, I think it'd be important for us to see truck turning templates and actually see how you're backing these trucks into these loading docks.
And you're not the only one that's asked for that. The retailers are insistent on it.
Because the issue is that huge hatched area you have next to your ADA spaces concerns me, because there's no real guidance for somebody who is visually impaired to come out of those spaces. Your ramp ends here, and so there's no guidance to tell that person, this is the way you need to go. I'm wondering if we can do something more flush concrete, different material, and then when they go to the crosswalk or somewhere in their ADA panel or something to give them that feeling that they know where they're going. Yeah.
That's
Especially now that it's gonna, potentially cars coming around that corner.
That's easy enough, sure.
Does the existing dumpster or dumpster enclosure for Marshalls, now are we subject to having that have to be enclosed? Screened?
I think so.
Yeah, so that's off to the left of the Marshall's loading area.
Yeah, it's right next to the truck.
Compactor
And
unit.
I apologize, I had one more, now I can't seem to find it. No, I'll leave that, let others, if anybody else has a comment, but those
Is
were
there-
basically,
Any stormwater with the fill-in?
I don't think they've changed the amount of impervious area with the fill-in. If anything, I'd say if they really are proposing any grass around that back tent, they've reduced it.
Yeah, we've reduced the overall impervious area on the site, so.
So thoughts on the lighting?
Yeah,
We're-
we can work towards, we do have pole lighting out there.
There
but-
is lighting back there. I think what you're asking is you'd just like to see what it is.
Right, and if your existing signage out there, assuming that some of those wall packs get removed and maybe get replaced along the building, if you can prove that it has some reasonable amount of lighting, then yeah, I'm not gonna say you're gonna add proposed, but we have nothing, and I'd be more than happy to say we only need to see that part of the plan and not the whole part.
Okay.
The whole project, you know what I mean, the whole site,
Sure, that's
to
reasonable.
kind of minimize your effort.
Can we do a partial lighting plan?
Sure. Yep,
Okay, so just the back is what we're concerned about. And you're okay with the parking? I mean, you know, you got the relief.
We are.
Okay. Tenants are.
Oh, actually, Mr. Chairman, I did have one more.
Yep.
Your dumpster that's out in the middle of the parking lot now, you'll need to provide turning templates to how a truck gets in there if those are currently being loaded.
Yep, I think we've done that, we just don't show.
We got them. We had to show Marshalls. They
Okay,
wanted to be-
that's, it's just, there's a lot going on back there. And so in a small amount of space, and you're coming around some odd corners where you're not expecting things to happen.
We are.
So anything we can do to visually guide is great.
Okay. Other questions from the board? Any member of the audience have any questions or concerns about this application? No? Okay, we'll close the public hearing. Thank you very much.
Can I just add a
Yes.
couple of comments about the waivers?
Sure, we'll open the public hearing back up. Listen to those public comments.
There were two waivers that staff did not support, and one of them is that we requested we stay with overhead wires instead of going underground, and I'll show you why. It's kind of a nightmare out back. Let's see if I can find it. Well, maybe not. Let's see. Yeah, so we're proposing to move that pole, actually remove it and just place it a little bit further to the south. And everything back there is overhead, including the transformers. And it actually goes to the right, you can see there, onto railroad property, and the pole itself is actually on railroad property. So if we had to go underground here, we'd, again, have to get permission from the railroad. It would only be a small section of wiring that would go underground, so we're asking if we could stay with above ground and request that waiver. And then the second waiver that really didn't come up in staff's report was there is a provision in the site plan ordinance to provide screening of loading areas behind the building. And it's not real clear. It does say if you're abutting a roadway, I'm not sure what the exact wording is, then you need to screen it from the public right away. We actually have,
It was abutting
abutting a residential.
adjacent property.
Yeah, residential property, which we're not. We actually, so the comment was, you can see this from I-93. We actually have the railroad between us and I-93, so we're not on an adjacent roadway. So we're asking for a waiver to provide screening of loading areas behind the building that's outlined in the site plan regulations. There just isn't any room out back. It would have to go on the railroad's property, which I don't think they would support if we were to do any sort of screening out back there.
Okay.
And that's it.
Anything else?
No.
Okay. So we will close the public hearing, move on in our packet here to Section 8. Again, using the findings of fact, the testimony that we heard here tonight, the packets of info that we've got, drawings and architectural materials and any public, we didn't get any public testimony on this. So based on those findings of fact, staff has got a couple items for us to tangle with here. Item 8.2 is to grant architectural design review approval for the proposed addition subject to the following conditions. And those are outlined, well, let's call them 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 on there. Would someone like to make a motion to grant? Oops, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. No, there's only 5.
Only 5.
Only 5?
Ha.
Start 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Where are you seeing 6? Under 8.2, change the white strip is 1. Lower the 3 parapets.
No, you're right.
3, 4,
I'm looking at a
and
different
5.
document.
Oh my goodness. Okay, 8.2. Would someone like to make a motion to grant architectural design review as outlined with the 5 bullet points on the packet?
So moved.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. 8.3 is to grant the waiver requests below from the listed sections, and those are, I'm not going to go through them all, but you can see them in your packet or outlined through section 29. Again, we got a couple of denials on the waiver requests below from the listed sections of the site plan, so let's do all these waivers in one shot here. So we've got deny the waiver requests for construction details, construction standards, stormwater design standards for minor site plans, underground utilities, required information, existing conditions, required information. Help me out here. So
Yeah,
we heard
so
him
some
say
of
about the underground utilities, and I'm sensitive to that. I know that that's one that we don't approve ever.
So,
Unless we, I mean, you guys always have to deny it because we want
Yeah.
them underground, but in this case, I think there's a
Yeah.
good argument not to do it. But
yeah, so section 25.021, go ahead and include that in the approve.
Okay.
Section 15.01, they pulled. 15.011, they also pulled. So everything there is okay to deny, except
25.021.
25.021, and staff, with the additional explanation that they provided, staff is okay with actually approving section 22.08.
Okay, so 2208 and 25021 can be moved into the approval.
Yep.
And deny 160222, 18.20, 15.01, 15.03, 15, oh no, you said they were
And-
pulled.
Yeah, you can just deny it, and that
Yep,
makes it
okay.
easier.
All right.
And then I'll have to
Question?
add a few to the approval that are on
Yep.
their request.
Yep.
Well, we just talked about lighting, and lighting is in the waiver, but they just agreed they would provide a lighting plan. So don't we have to take 150426 and 1602 out of 8.3?
Well, we don't want to deny it.
Yeah,
so
no, I would
I
say.
think we'd approve it with condition
Yes.
that they provide a
Yep.
plan to staff that, for the back half of the building.
Exactly.
But wouldn't they no longer need the waiver if they're going to provide it?
They're not providing the whole, so the section requires a lighting plan for the
Whole
whole
plan.
site.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that-
so-
I just
so
want to
you're
clarify so we
waiving-
didn't
yes.
hem them into something.
So
Yeah.
make sure you mention that as a condition, because I'm not going to remember all these numbers, okay? So,
And then the other ones that we need to add a waiver for, is, let's see, I said we're okay with 160212. That one was struck. Waiver, okay, the waiver, add 20.02.
20.02,
Mhm.
20.02?
Yep.
To the approval?
To the approval.
Okay.
had, and I hope Morgan and Chris, you're paying attention because I missed something. That was support. I know there were two construction details that they want waivers for. They want a waiver from the construction detail for the dumpsters and the concrete sidewalk. They're requesting to allow specific non-city details for the dumpster enclosure and sidewalk construction details. Refer to additional document, construction detail waiver request. And Pete hasn't looked at this either.
Make it conditional upon engineering approval.
That would work.
Then that way it gives
Yeah.
him a little time to work with them.
Yeah.
Allows us to move forward tonight,
Yeah.
not have to continue.
That's a great idea. I like it.
Hey, I'm thinking.
Okay, so I wrote down 20.02, and then we're gonna take out 2208 and 25.021 and move them into the approval, right?
Yep.
And then deny the rest.
Yep.
Okay. Are we comfortable? We comfortable with what we're doing here? So again, 8.3 is to grant the waiver requests outlined, and those are outlined again in all your packet there, all the way down through 29. We're gonna move over 20.02, 2208, and 25.021 to that, and put in a condition that the lighting plan be submitted to staff for the back half of the project.
Right.
And a condition that the waiver request for the details of 16.0222 and 18.20 are subject to approval by the engineering division.
Okay. Okay, make that as part of the motion.
Yeah, so there's actually two of the lighting ones. I just want to clarify, 15.04 and 16.02.
Yeah, it's because they're all in different sections.
Nope, that's fine. I just want to make sure we clarify.
Okay, and then we'll do the waivers all in one and then deny everything that's left on the denial list under 8.4. Can we do that?
Yeah.
Okay. Would someone like to make a motion to
So move.
approve
as
those waivers
eloquently
as
stated.
eloquently outlined as possible? We got a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. That moves us on to 8.5. Okay, 8.5, what am I doing here? Continue the minor site plan application, because that's not right?
Correct. So we're. yeah.
So this
Should
is
the
to
board
grant,
choose
so this is to grant
then-
minor
yeah.
site plan approval, and
minor
those are under precedent conditions 1 through, 1 and 2, and it's 2A through, hey, how you changed gears on me here.
There's a lot.
JKLM,
Through N.
B.
cow, through
B,
6,
2B, and then precedent goes to 5.
1 to 6, no, 6,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Wow, that's a precedent conditions and a half. Would someone like to make a motion to grant that minor site plan approval as outlined with, again, precedent conditions 1 through 6, and I forgot the subsequent conditions, because subsequent conditions 1 through 10. Would someone like to make that motion?
So moved. Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. You're all set? Good luck with the plan? Don't want to see you again? For this plan. I always enjoy Brixmore coming to the table, but for this plan, we're good. All right, let's move on. Yeah,
I'm gonna see this in
yeah.
Friday's Concord.
Let's move on. I believe we're at 7D, is that correct?
You are
All right,
correct.
let's read 7D into the record and welcome Granite Engineering, if you like.
Okay, Granite Engineering LLC on behalf of Pitco Friolater LLC requests approvals for an amendment to a major site plan approval for certain waivers from the site plan regulations, conditional use permit for a use in the Aquifer Protection District Community Water Systems Protection Area, and a conditional use permit for the construction of fewer parking spaces for a 356,200 24 square foot industrial building and associated site improvements at 15 Integra Drive in the Office Park Performance District, Industrial District, and Open Space Residential District.
All right, welcome to, let's get a determination of completeness component. This was done on September 18th, so staff did determine the application complete. Set the public hearing for tonight. If we could get a quick staff update on this.
Sure. Last month, you determined a complete and a regional impact. We received responses from the Central New Hampshire Regional Commission as well as the Pembroke Planning Board. Their responses were essentially the same as they were back in the original approval. Staff is, the applicant's here tonight for an amendment to their major site plan, which has been extended and is valid for some waivers as a response to conditions put on the project through the AOT process, going through the Heritage Bureau and Fish and Game. Staff is in support of these waivers. The applicant also went before the Conservation Commission because the CUPs for the project had expired, so they had to reapply. It is essentially the same exact CUP being requested as originally approved, short of the revisions due to the state comments. They went for Conservation Commission. Conservation Commission is recommending approving the CUP to the Aquifer Protection District as submitted.
Excellent. Well, welcome back to the table. If you could state your names for the record.
Thank you, Board. My name is Brent Cole with Granite Engineering.
I'm Dan Luker, Freddie Flaherty, counsel for Pitco.
We are here tonight for obviously Pitco Fry later. You guys know the project very well. We've met with the board multiple times, including a few months ago for a waiver and extension. We are here tonight for a site plan amendment because of two waivers that have come up during the alteration of terrain process. We were granted alteration of terrain permit last month, which was a huge hurdle for us. It took us almost 4 years to get that permit. And so we are in receipt of that, as well as our sewer discharge permit, which concludes all of our state permits and will allow us to finalize the plans for this project. In addition to the two waivers, the site plan amendment, we are here tonight for the conditional use permits that were granted unanimously back in 2021. I will start off with the waivers because that's new information. During the AOT permit process, Fish and Game requested that we revise the frame and grates on site to a smaller opening, which prevents smaller turtles and snakes from falling in the catch basins. We conceded to that after talking with town staff. We left your right-of-way catch basin frame and grates a typical city, but anything on site, which being private, has been shifted to a smaller opening. There are more of the openings, but they are smaller, and it will prevent wildlife from getting trapped in the catch basin. It should be noted that there was some confusion in the waiver. It is not a New Hampshire DOT type A. It's actually a NENA Foundry type A. We all agreed that would have these 2-inch by 2-inch openings. That is a NENA Foundry type A frame and grate, not a New Hampshire DOT type A frame and grate. The type B is a New Hampshire DOT type B, and that is in your right of way. So there has been some confusion going back and forth with the state, but we all agreed on a 2-inch by 2-inch opening. Furthermore, there will be some differences in grate capacity. We will work with your city engineer to ensure that the private site meets your standards for grate capacity. We have storm analysis to be able to determine all that, and we'll confirm that with your city engineer. It is also noted that the frame and grates from NENA Foundry are H20 loaded, so they are up to a standard to meet traffic volumes and traffic loads. The second request that Fish and Game asked was to remove the sumps on the catch basins site-wide. We compromised on 6 of the 50 catch basins. So in the lower part of the site, down in through this area here, there's a large stormwater basin. And we agreed that 6 catch basin sumps would be omitted to prevent wildlife from being trapped inside the catch basin. So wildlife enters through the pipes from the infiltration ponds. They then come to the first catch basin, they fall into the sump, and they find endangered species dead inside these sumps when they go and they vac them out. So they're requesting that one specific line of catch basins remove these sumps. We have increased the sediment forebay volume to offset the sump volume and to make sure that there's enough sediment trapping before it gets into the infiltration pond. There is also a maintenance road that circumvents the infiltration pond, which allows for construction vehicles to get down there to maintain the sediment traps. So with that, the first waiver is from section 6.2.E.1, which is essentially your construction standards relating to catch basins. It's truly unique for the property because we do have endangered species out here, and Fish and Game has been very involved on this project. The second, or the third request, but the second waiver that Fish and Game has requested is substituting your typical seed mix with a more wildlife-friendly, wildlife-sensitive mix out there. They've also requested that we remove the loam from a lot of the steep slopes on the project and just seed the native soils. We will have erosion control fabric that goes over it and allows this wildlife mix to take, but it's certainly more in line with what the endangered species like out there and the habitat that they're trying to protect out there. We saw no issue with it. We talked with town staff, we talked with city, and they didn't have an issue with it. We don't feel like this deviation is contrary to the regulations. Those are the two waivers. The two conditional use permits that was approved back in 2021, they were extended in 2022. Then we went for an extension in 2023, and a clerical error they didn't get brought forward with the site plan that you guys extended in 2023. So technically they are separate applications. They do need to be extended separately. So we're here tonight to essentially reapprove them or kind of just extend those permits with the site plan application. As Alex said, we have gone in front of the commission, we have gone in front of we have applied for regional. There were no comments similar to last time. The first conditional use permit is for impervious area within the aquifer. We have stormwater ponds that are treating the stormwater. We don't have any septic systems. We have no blasting. There are no private wells within 75 feet. It meets all of the conditional use standards, and I can get into it more if you guys want me to. The second conditional use permit is for reduction in parking. I think you guys probably remember the presentation regarding that, but PITCO knows what they need for parking. They need roughly about 400 spaces. Code requires 470. We certainly can fit an extra 70 spaces, and we have them outlined on the plan in case one day they do have to build those. With that, Mr. Chair, I'll hand it back to you. Please let me know if you guys have any questions. Go from there.
Questions, Jeff?
I do. I'm glad you probably know, you might have already known those comments on the drainage came from me. One comment I do have is you don't show any of these changes on the plans.
Sure we do.
These plans are updated with the change in the sediment forebay.
Sure.
So you're looking at, or the plans we're looking at?
Okay, so.
Yeah, the plans that are dated.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to understand, the stamp is originally by Jennifer McCourt, and you're changing plans. You have something that's from her allowing you to change your plans?
Sure. Jen has been involved for 4 years. She is going into a retirement state.
Okay, I only ask because it becomes a legal issue. I just want to make sure.
No legal issue here. She stamped this plan on 8/12/24. She is the engineer of record.
Okay.
There is an
She
email.
sent an email earlier today.
That's fine, and I just want to clarify it because it has come up in other cases, so I just, not here, but in other areas where it's been an issue, I just don't want it to be. Okay, I apologize, I must have missed the change then on the plans.
Brent, what's the date you're working with?
8/6.
I was talking to you, Brent.
Yeah, it's the same, the plan, that's the same revision date that was uploaded with the agenda. So maybe you could show us you're utilizing that, I think, anyway, right?
Yeah, what would you like me to show you?
The access road, is that what the question is?
Oh yeah, the access road's been there. It's a 10-foot wide access road that circumvents the property. The sediment forebays, this has been something that was actually original comment back in 2021. So the sediment forebays were built in with excess volume to make up from the sumps 4 years ago. So not a drastic change in the last 3 years, but like I said, we have been dealing with Fish and Game for many years on this project. So that was a first revision that we made back in 2021.
Okay. Other questions? Any member of the audience have any questions or concerns about this application? No? Okay, we'll close the public hearing. Thank you very much. So in your packet, we've got section 8, using, again, our findings of fact, the information presented tonight by the applicant, the information that's in our packets. We can use that as a finding of fact to move forward and look for granting the waivers. 8.2 is to grant the waiver request below for the listed section of the site plan regulations using the criteria of RSA 674-44 3E2.
When you get there, I would just like to revise the language, section 2202 construction standards to allow a New Hampshire DOT type A catch basin.
Yep.
If we could just revise that language to allow a Nina Foundry type A catch basin.
So instead of striking out New Hampshire DOT type A and put in a Nina Foundation basin?
Nina Foundry type A.
Type A.
Type A. Okay, with that noted, and section 27093, which is site restoration, that the applicant outlined the different mix and the different level in the slopes. Would someone like to make a motion to grant those waivers as outlined?
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made. Second, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. 8.3 is to grant the conditional use permit for Article 28.3.6D4, the CUP required for certain uses of the Aquifer Protection District. Would someone like to make a motion to grant the conditional use permit in 8.3?
So moved. Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. 8.4 is to grant the conditional use permit for Article 28.711B, construction of fewer parking spaces than zoning allows, or the zoning ordinance recommends. Would someone like to make a motion for 8.4 to grant that conditional use permit?
So moved.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. And 8.5 is to grant major site plan amendment approval for the additional waivers to the conditionally approved major site plan approval for the construction of a 356,000 and some, I think there's some additional feet on there, isn't there? 356,000 square foot industrial, building for manufactured housing, office space, and associated site improvements at 15 Integra Drive, subject to the following precedent and subsequent conditions, and those are outlined in precedent conditions 1 through 10, and subsequent conditions 1 through 10. Would someone like to make a motion to grant that
Second.
major site plan amendment approval? Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. You are all set for a little while longer. Good luck.
Thank you.
On behalf of Pitco, I just want to thank the board for the patience. We've been at this a long time.
Yep.
And,
Looking forward to seeing it come to fruition.
well, now that we finally have the AOT permit and all the approvals, we're going to get back to, we've been designing the building in hope now we can do it with reality.
Yeah.
We'll finalize the design, there's some really funky manufacturing systems inside it.
Yeah.
That all has to be repriced, and then we figure out the financing, and with luck, Pitco would like to break ground as soon as possible. It's going to
Great.
take a few months, but
I know they were going to do solar. Are they still planning on doing solar?
it's a consideration right now. A lot depends on construction prices and the
Cost
cost of
of the-
steel, and all that's gone up over the last 4
Sure
years.
has, yeah.
But they're trying.
Yeah, good.
So,
Well, good luck.
all right, thanks.
Thank you, guys. And thanks for being persistent. Richard D. Bartlett, he's not here, is he? No? All right. Skip over that one. All right, let's get 7E into the record. Come on up. If we could read that into the record.
Okay, 7E. Richard D. Bartlett and Associates LLC, on behalf of 87 South Main Street LLC, requests approval for a minor subdivision application to create a 2-building condominium development with 1 existing commercial building, Unit 1, addressed as 85 South Main Street, and 1 existing residential building, Unit 2, addressed as 87 South Main Street, on tax map lot 7413Z38 in the urban commercial district.
Okey doke. Is there a determination of completeness component on this? I apologize.
Yes.
I think there is there? Okay, so we do have a motion, we need to give a motion for determination of completeness. It is not a development of regional impacts. The staff has found the application complete, not a development of regional impact, and set the public hearing for tonight. Would someone like to make a motion to find the application complete and open the public hearing?
So moved. Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. We will get a quick staff update on this if we could.
Sure. This is a subdivision to convert the land ocean to a condominium. Staff is recommending conditional approval. The applicant's also requesting 2 waivers to scale and to not provide all of the sewer information. Staff is in support of. The applicant did over the weekend, turn around revised plans and narrative and responses. Staff has not been able to review them, and they're not provided with your agenda, but Mr. Bradley might be able to speak to that a little bit more. I think that's about all I've got.
Okay. I guess if anybody's calling for condominium, you get the calls in the city of Concord, huh? Seems like that's been what we've been seeing you for. Welcome to the table. If you could state your name for the record.
Sure. My name is Mark Sargent, and I'm with Richard Bartlett and Associates.
I'm Pete Hodgkins, owner of 87 South Main Street, LLC.
Well, welcome. Tell us a little bit, Mark, if you can, about this.
Sure. Well, this property is located at 85 and 87 South Main Street. It has a total area of 0.43 acres, 86 feet of frontage on South Main Street, and the building currently has, the site currently has 2 buildings on it, Pete's Real Estate Business, KV Realty, and then in the rear is a single-family unit which was granted by a variance that we received in 2022. The proposal before the board this evening is to convert this to a 2-unit condominium. The building up front closer to South Main Street would be a commercial unit that would have a garage bay located in the back. There are actually 2 garage bays, so this would be limited common area. The remainder portion of the rear building would be residential, and that would have 1 garage bay, which would be limited common area. There's also some limited common area associated with the residential building in the back, and that's that land that is north and east of that existing building. Everything else is common area. Alec mentioned there was, we supported or provided additional or revised plans. A lot of the comments were minor, I think, at the best. I think we're good to go. And if you have any
Turner
questions.
Avenue, who'd have known? It's Turner Avenue, right down next to that.
Former.
Former Turner Avenue, yes. Yeah.
No longer.
Parking
Used to go
lot
down to
now?
the railroad down there.
Okay, questions from the board? Looks pretty straightforward. Hello, Dina. How are you? Welcome to the table. Just for the record, Dina's joined us. You heard the beginning of this, so you can vote on that. Okay, I didn't even see you pop in. Okay, any member of the audience have any questions or concerns? I guess not. There's nobody there, so, yes.
I could bring up just in case, because I know I've been working with Mr. Mullen. I don't know if we want to discuss, one of the precedent conditions is to provide in the bottom corner, this underground electrical and fiber optic. One of the precedent conditions is to provide a documentation that supports that right or establishing easement as part of this condition. And then the other one is the metering. And I just in case we had to discuss those or.
Okay.
The water metering?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what he's talking about.
Just to be compliant with one of those. Those were the 2 I recall from Dan's response.
Right, yeah, there is, as you notice, kind of to the south of the former Turner Ave, there is a pole there, and that's where the electrical came off of. And it does cross another parcel property. There isn't a formal easement associated with it, it's just there. And Pete just told me that's something that we can work out.
I'm sure that property would, they've basically said, do anything to that slope that you would like.
Yep, certainly. I just want to make sure that you walk away knowing what the present conditions are, and so does the board.
Sure.
And those were 2 of them.
Yeah, and the other issue was the separate meeting for the water. As it pertains, as you can see, the water comes off of South Main Street, hits that commercial building first, and then originally when that building was built in the rear, that was when South Main Street had recently been constructed, so Peter wasn't able to get additional, or dig an additional trench out there to bring additional water through there, so that's what we've ended up with. The water essentially goes from South Main Street to Commercial Street, and then, or the commercial building, and then out of the commercial building to the residential. And I know that's been an issue in the past with the metering thing, so.
Look, you may need to, if I recall, and I don't have that section from me, you may need to add another meter, so each unit has their own meter, and they are paid for by the association, but I think it's a way to I think that might be a way to satisfy, but.
I think that's easy enough. Yeah, I had discussions with the water department at that time, and I think their concern was people not paying their water bill, and they'd have to shut off both buildings as opposed to an individual.
There's a menu of options with the condominium, and you have to conform to one or more. And I just want to make sure that, as it stands, I don't think you do. And as long as you're willing to make those changes, that's
absolutely, yeah. Is that what you're proposing? Separate meters?
The comment is to satisfy one or more.
Adhere to them. So, Alec, you're comfortable with the minor subdivision approval and the waiver request without any further review?
Absolutely. I just wanted to make sure that everyone, that especially the applicant, knew that there were still 2 remaining precedent conditions.
And they were outlined in the precedent conditions in the packet.
We were aware of it.
Yeah, sure you are. I'm sure you are. Okay, so again, in our section 8 of our staff report, using the findings of fact of the information we've heard tonight from the applicant and the packet of info that we've got, item 8.2 is to grant the waiver request below for the sections of the subdivision regulations regarding using the criteria of 674-36 2N2 and section 3508 of the subdivision regulations, and those are outlined in 1502 and 1503. 1502 being scale, 1503.11 being municipal sewer. Would someone like to make a motion to grant the waiver requests as outlined?
So moved.
Second.
We got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. 8.4. Skipped right over 8.3. 8.4 is to grant minor subdivision approval for the 2-unit condominium subdivision of 87 South Main Street, subject to the following precedent and subsequent conditions, and those are outlined in precedent conditions 1 through 7, 3 pages of 7, 1 through 7, and subsequent conditions 1, 2, and 3. Would someone like to make a motion to grant minor subdivision approval as outlined?
So moved.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. You guys are all set.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much for sticking out with us.
Oh, okay.
All right. And we'll move on to 7F in the agenda. If we could read item 7F into the record.
Richard D. Bartlett and Associates LLC, on behalf of DeYoung Co., Stephen Abbott, Claudia Altimus, and 4 to 6 Hutchinson Avenue Condo Association LLC, requests approval for an amended condominium subdivision to annex a portion of 35 Downing Street to become limited common area at 6 Hutchinson Avenue in the downtown residential district.
All right. If we could get a quick staff update on this one.
Sure, this is, this application, there was an application in this area, lot line adjustment between 35 Downing and this property that came before you a couple months ago. As one of the precedent conditions of that lot line adjustment was that the 4 to 6 Hutchinson Ave had to amend their condominium, so that is what's before you now. Pretty much just updating it with the land swap.
Okay, we do have a determination of completeness component in this. Staff has determined the application complete, not a development of regional impact. Would someone like to make a motion to find the application complete and open the public hearing?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Welcome back to the table, Mr. Sargent. If you could state your name formally for the record.
It is Mark Sargent from Richard Bartlett and Associates.
Still?
And yes, still. And I am here tonight representing the 4 through 6 Hutchinson Ave Condominium Association. As the association name states, the property is located at 4 through 6 Hutchinson Ave It has a total area of 0.28 acres, 142 feet of frontage. It is a 2-unit condominium. And as Alec mentioned, we were here in August for a lot line adjustment that annexed a portion of 35 Downing Street to the 4 through 6 Hutchins Street. So as part of that approval, the planning staff said we needed to come back and see you folks to amend the condominium here. So that's what we're here for this evening. So we'll be adding the recently annexed portion as limited common area for 6 Hutchinson's Ave, and 6 is the unit to the south. And so the common area, or the limited common area for 6 is all that land that is behind the building and to the south of it. And then the limited common area for 4 Hutchinson Ave would be all the land that is located north of the building. And that's simply it.
Simply it. Okay, member of the board have any questions, concerns? Any member of the audience have any question, concerns? No? Close the public hearing. Okay, it was quick, huh? Moves us right on to, magically, it's section 8 again. So again, using a findings of fact that we've heard the applicant provide some testimony here tonight, and the information that we received in our packets, we have one item to do, which is to grant the minor subdivision approval for the subdivision amendment at 4 to 6 Hutchinson Avenue as submitted, subject to the following precedent and subsequent conditions, and those are outlined in precedent conditions 1, we go again, huh? 1 through 7, and subsequent conditions 1, 2, and 3. Would someone like to make a motion to grant that minor subdivision approval as outlined?
So moved.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. You are all set.
All right, thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your time.
And as always, it's a pleasure to see you.
Always nice to be at the end of the agenda, huh?
No, I must have pissed somebody off because I had the simplest ones. I'm at the bottom.
We saved the best for last, Mark. Okay, any other business to come before the board tonight? Staff? No? Board members? No? If not, we will take a motion. A motion to adjourn has been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. We are adjourned.
We're starting to get.
8:13.